Well, Pat, thank you so much for being our Artist of the Month. It's super exciting. It was a unanimous, exciting pick. Yours was easy. So,
I'm honored to be selected and to be a part of that project.
so let's just start at the beginning. How I see
Yeah.
where you are here. How did this happen? How did you end up being this
Well,
multi-instrumentalist, gamelan, jazz, free jazz, rock
um,
and roller, new composition, saxophone
yeah,
playing percussionist? How the heck did that happen?
my story. Well, yeah, this is interesting because I grew up in the '70s listening to a lot of prog rock and stuff. My first performance opportunities actually were I played bass and sang backup vocals in country and country rock bands in
I
the
love
early '80s.
it.
Yeah, so I was out there, doing the Dewdrop Inn in DeSoto, Kansas, and playing down in Argentine and Armourdale and KCK. That was pretty scary, let me tell you. But yeah, so that was not working for me. So I went to school, back to school. I'd always been interested in writing songs and kind of played guitar some and wrote some songs as a teen. Got into playing bass. So I went to the conservatory. My mom had gone to music school and like gotten a degree from Northwestern and stuff. So got into the conservatory
Can I
and
stop you right
spent
there? Did you say
yeah.
you were writing songs even from the very beginning?
Oh
Like, when
yeah,
did
yeah.
you?
I think I started writing songs on guitar like when I was 12 or 13 years old.
So that was just real natural to you, that the
Yeah.
songwriting and making your own music?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, I was never a lyricist, that's for sure. Um, maybe dabbled a little bit, but that was not my thing. So yeah, I was always playing around mainly with guitar, I guess, and writing songs. And you learn about drop D tuning and DADGAD and that kind of stuff, and exploring that. And uh, yeah, so the creative side of it had always been there. And I had pretty much decided I wanted to be a musician, I think, from my early teens also, and had been a multi-instrumentalist coming up too. I don't know their short attention span, but I played a bunch of different instruments coming up, like started out on piano, got into third grade band playing French horn, took a bassoon when I was 11 because my mom told me, you'll always work if you play the bassoon, which is not true, but I mean, it's kind of hilarious, but I did quite a bit of bassoon playing. Um, yeah, and then percussion I took up in seventh grade, drums and mallets. I played a lot of mallets, marimba, and stuff like that. So I was playing that when I got into college, and then of
Did,
course guitar and bass
were
came
you in
along.
a were you in a high school band? And if so, what was it called?
No,
Please
well,
tell me you were
yes.
in a
Oh
band called
my
like
God,
Broken Wing or something like
this
that.
is so embarrassing because I was in when I was in what was it, eighth grade, I think, when I was 13. I was in a band called The New Generation. We lived we lived in outside Jefferson City, this place called Lake Mikey, and I was going to the New Bloomfield school system for that last year before we moved back up to Independence. And yeah, The New Generation. And it was so crazy. The band had started out with like this brother and sister who had taken lessons at a music store, and the girl played piano and the brother played lead guitar lines, and this other guy played rhythm, and they'd play songs out of books, like Sunshine on My Shoulders or whatever. And it was just the goofiest thing. I played drums in that band, and it was finally starting to move, like we got a bass player and a singer, and we were starting to do more things recognizable as a normal band. And then we left and moved back up here. So that was my junior high band. And then I wasn't in any kind of band through my high school years other than school band and orchestra. And then
And
I,
there
I got
got into
into the
conservatory.
country bands after I got out. I dropped out of high school and got my GED because I was totally over it. And moved out and started working at the Independent Sanitarium and Hospital, and met a guitar player there named Ed Mahan, who's a really good player. And he pulled me in when they lost their bass player. And I played in one band with him, and then we left together and played with another one for a year called Chaco. The first one was a double bill. It was billed as Yesteryears and the Shantays. And we had a different act depending on the name of the band and different costumes.
So you dropped out of high school, got your GED, but then made the decision to go into a conservatory. That's an
Well,
interesting
that was a
shift
couple
right there.
years later, yeah.
And
Yeah, I
your
mean, I
mom-
basically, I dropped out because my sister had done the same thing prior. It's kind of complicated story, but when I was going into my senior year at Crispin, I needed a half a credit to graduate. And I already had a
Wow.
full-time job. I wanted to graduate early. They wouldn't let me. So I just asked my parents if I could go ahead and leave and just take the GED. And my dad always brags that one of our neighbors down in Jefferson City worked in the school board in Jeff City, and she had said, "Your son got the highest score we've ever had on the GED." And I was just like, yeah, that's probably a testament to how stupid the other people were who were taking the test. But yeah, so I just moved on. I was working and had the opportunity to, get in a band. Not my first choice, but I was gigging. I was like playing every weekend and working. So in these
Tell us
dive.
about that shift to the conservatory then.
Well, I just it was really stressful because the second band I was in, really, the guy was kind of like a Willie Nelson type, and he really wanted to do a professional thing, and I just reached the point where I didn't want to do it anymore, and it was gut wrenching to quit. I just didn't want to do it anymore, basically, because we were a bar band. We played like the Dewdrop Inn out in DeSoto, and another place called Bob and Mike's, which was out in Grandview. Those were our primary places, and then private things here and there.
Frat
Yeah,
parties.
I was ready for it. Yeah. Well, man, I remember, God, playing out in the middle of a field in Kansas, playing in a Quonset hut, which was crazy. Yeah, it just like I didn't want to make a career out of that at that time, and decided I needed to change, and was just like, okay, let's go back to college, because my parents both, were educated, and that sort of sets a bar for you of what you want to achieve in your life, I think. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. And I prepared my audition materials on marimba and went and auditioned and got in. And I had already decided I wanted to study composition, but they don't let you declare that you have to do a couple of years first. But it seems like I went part-time initially because I was working full-time. So yeah, so that was the move.
And so you went into conservatory to study percussion, and at that point, and percussion and composition. So
Right.
what were you imagining your future would be at that point? What were you thinking that you would be doing with that?
I had no idea at that point. Of course, when you start going to college, especially as a composer, really the primary avenue that opens is as an academic. So I guess that possibility, I don't think I really had an agenda at that point, other than I wanted to learn a lot and play a lot, which is exactly what I did. I played in tons of ensembles, and my mallet skills were very advanced for my status coming in. So like I played in the graduate students percussion quartet when I was, a sophomore, basically, because I was more an advanced player. And once they found out I played bassoon, of course, they wrangled me into playing bassoon and gave me a little scholarship and stuff. So I was playing in band and orchestra
Did you
and
have any?
chamber music, contemporary music ensemble, stuff like that.
I was just going to say, were there any particular mentors that guided you or stuck out to you, or that really made an impression on you at that time?
Well, of course, my primary composition teacher was Jim Moberly, who was always
Oh, yeah.
great and encouraging and really, pushed people doing what they wanted to do versus what you needed to do, which, my other professor was Gerald Kemner, who's more of a traditionalist, which is a good thing also. So yeah, I'd say those two guys as composers, my professors, definitely.
What were some of the musical discoveries that you made during this time, like the kind of stuff that you came across that had you not gone to conservatory, you may not have
Um,
encountered?
in the stacks at the conservatory music library, going through albums, finding like Arnold Schoenberg's Verknocht and Steve Reich, actually, at that point. Music for large ensemble is one that sticks with me. And minimalism, Terry Riley. My percussion professor, actually, or not professor, teacher prior to that, Galen Umbarker. Yeah, right. He was my percussion. My mom was great about, getting me teachers from the symphony. So I studied with Galen for years, and also John
Wow.
Wright, who was the second bassoonist, was my bassoon teacher. But Galen introduced me to Terry Riley and In C. I don't know that you're familiar with that. It's famous composition, cellular construction. I think that probably had a big effect on me too, that exposure to minimalism. And then I explored more Terry Riley on my own, which led me to Steve Reich and that type of music. But also I was just like looking at all the contemporary avant-garde music that I could get my hands on. And
What about the contemporary or avant-garde music appealed to you? Because this is about probably the time when I began to know you, when stuff like the Human Observation Lab was happening. And
oh
I
yeah,
remember,
Jim Moberly nurtured all of us in that. Yeah, we had a band called Third Ear. You
I
remember
remember. Oh yes.
that? In fact,
I think
that was another thing I did last year, was compile Leo Wetherill, of course, who was in that band, had old recordings we had done at the UMKC recording studio. And so I asked everybody if it was okay, and I pulled those together and put them up on YouTube. If anybody's interested, look up Third Ear, Kansas City. If you want to hear some of that old music. But
what is it about that was so interesting to you? Because there's, that's a very specific thing. Lots of people are not interested in really hanging out there on the edge of what is music, what is not music, what is pleasing, what is
just
not.
our personalities, I think that's just the people that we are. And interestingly now, like Twain and his girlfriend Bonnie moved out to Portland years ago. He's playing like the sort of gypsy jazz thing. I think we're all exploring, and PJ totally was into performance art, even though she's a very talented
Opera.
opera singer, which she's left behind now. She and her husband are like tantric masters now and producing works or books and workshops and stuff like that. But yeah, performance art was a big thing in that period. Leo and PJ were more into that. I think I was a little more resistant to that thing, even though I produced works. Did you go to any of those old shows at the Old Ship when we collaborated with the Art Institute students? Yeah, I just remember that place being packed to the hilt and doing this performance art piece. Yeah, I got to play some really interesting music and meet some interesting composers. And those are things that really form you, I think. And then the world music thing started coming in the early 90s.
Let's talk about that.
Late 80s, early 90s.